work and really helping children and families get back on the path to self-sufficiency. I've also been a high school registrar, so extremely familiar with McKinney-Vento, which we'll dive into shortly. And I will let Angelica go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Good morning and happy Friday. Sorry, I do apologize. I don't have access to a camera today, but I am coming to you from the Wellness in Schools program, also with Contra Costa County Office of Education's Wellness in Schools program, and I've been with the county office for 2 years now. I came from West Contra Costa Unified School District, serving the county as a truancy specialist and supporting the return to school for youth. So let's get started. Thank you.
Okay, guys, go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. All right. So our topic today, education rights for children and youth. All right, so our agenda for today. We are going to talk about homelessness and how it pertains to the McKinney-Vento law. We'll talk about our McKinney-Vento students. Who are they? How do we identify them? And also unaccompanied youth and how that fits into this puzzle. Then we'll chat about some of the challenges that our homeless students face, especially when enrolling in school, in addition to enrolling in school, but academically succeeding and getting on that path to graduation. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about equal access for our homeless children and youth and how to maintain their education throughout their time experiencing homelessness. So I thought we would start with a little activity. So you have just learned that you and your family must be out of your house in 15 minutes. However, you can only take what fits into your backpack. So what do you take in those 15 minutes? You guys can just go ahead and put some answers in the chat, if you will. I see some answers coming through already. So some thoughts to think about during this activity. And again, you can just put them in the chat. Why did you choose to select the items that you did and leave the rest behind? How did it feel to make those choices and really just having enough room to put in a small backpack? How will you do without all those things that you have to leave at your house because you have to get out? And where are you going to get all the things that you need, but you just don't have them anymore? And would anyone like to discuss their answer? Or Natalie, would you like to read some of our answers that came through in chat?
Sure. So a lot of people are saying important documents, medication, wallets, changes of clothing, toiletries, passports, vaccine cards, chargers for their tech, but definitely a lot of like medical documents or legal documents, and then medical prescriptions and stuff.
Right. And as you guys have probably gathered, the reason behind this short activity is our homeless students and families are on the move. And sometimes it is as quick as 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour to gather up what you need and get out. So it really just puts into perspective how quickly you have to think and get all of those items in one backpack and have one bag. So we're going to just jump right in and start with some data, homeless numbers at a glance. So these numbers are from the 2019-2020 report. So nationwide, 1.5 million homeless students. Here in California, 250,000, almost, students. And right here in Contra Costa County, 2,449 students. You'll see right below that 41% of all homeless children are in fact under the age of 5. So that 41% comes from the nationwide number at 1.5 million students. Pretty alarming numbers. And of course, our goal is to end homelessness eventually. So when we see those numbers increase year after year, it's pretty eye-opening and disheartening. So before we get into defining homelessness, we must first understand the root of family homelessness. So some of those causes of family homelessness, economic challenges, of course. As you all know, there is a huge lack of affordable housing here in Contra Costa County, but within the state and nationwide, actually. Other economic challenges. The family may already be living in poverty before they are in fact homeless. Underemployment, unemployment. Some parents are single income, one income families. Even with dual incomes, as we know, sometimes it still is hard to make ends meet. Another cause of family homelessness, there might be health challenges in the home with the children, adolescent, adults in the home. Someone in the home might have disabilities, mental health issues. One or both parents might be struggling with addiction. Therefore, they can't work, unable to pay their rent, leading to family homelessness. Domestic violence is another cause of family homelessness. If an adult flees with the children, they ultimately sometimes end up in a shelter. So another cause of family homelessness. So youth homelessness. The causes for youth homelessness are a little bit different. Most of our youth have endured some type of abuse or neglect, therefore leaving their home. There could be acute conflict in the home. A pregnancy, unplanned, a youth is afraid to talk to their parents. Might be a gender identity or sexual orientation issue. Oftentimes youth do not feel accepted when trying to explain this to their parents. It could be an issue within the family, step parents or step children's. Substance abuse, again, forcing the youth to leave the home. Economic challenges that plague youth homelessness as well. Sometimes there's pressure for an older child to go out and get a job or to go stay with a friend or a family member because the family simply cannot feed another mouth due to lack of income, or the child just simply leaves because of that pressure. So where do these families and youth go? Well, for some, shelters are not an option. There's rules at the shelter, there's curfews, there's stipulations and things where some shelters here in the county only take adult male, or there's no children allowed, there's no pets allowed. Most of the families do not want to be split up. However, there are some communities that don't even offer shelters. Here in the county, shelter demand often exceeds the supply. The shelters here in Contra Costa County, I know that when we submit referrals, there's no space available, or someone just has to show up and be on a wait list, if you will, and see if there's a bed available. Another concern that I've heard from families and youth, I don't want to go to the shelter, I don't feel safe, or they've had a traumatic event happen at a shelter, so I don't want to go back. Curfews are also a concern. So conventionally, folks work from 8 to 5, 9 to 5:30, 10 to 6, 11 to 7. There's a lot of shifts. But if someone can only get evening work or graveyard shift work, that doesn't work. Curfews have shelters have strict rules. You have to be in at a certain time, you have to leave at a certain time, you can only return at a certain time. So if I work midnight to 9 p.m., that's not really going to work. And then finally, shared housing arrangements. Someone initially offers their home as a gracious host, which is wonderful, but after a while that may become taxing on the host family. They may realize that they're spread a little thin. Unfortunately for our unaccompanied youth, our runaway youth, they may stay with an adult or a family and then ultimately have an unscrupulous host. So in the end, that teen may end up being put out for labor or trafficking or sex, which is really unfortunate. So the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. I'm sure mostly everyone in this room has heard that name one time or another, but it's the law, so we're going to jump right in and learn a little bit more about the good old McKinney-Vento Act. So in a nutshell, the McKinney-Vento is a federal law, and what it really does is it protects our children and youth that are experiencing homelessness. It says that they have the same educational rights and protections as our non-homeless students. The McKinney-Vento Act also funds the EHCY program. So EHCY stands for the Education for Homeless Children and Youth. And this act also applies to every LEA, local education agency. So that includes our county offices of education, our charter schools, direct and locally funded, as well as every public school district. So a little backstory on McKinney-Vento Act. It was signed way back in 1987 by President Ronald Reagan. It was originally known as the Stuart B. McKinney Act. And what it did is it mandated those states to really take a look at the residency requirements for our homeless children and youth. So what's being required when a homeless family comes in to enroll a student? And really wanted states to look at those problems. What's plaguing our homeless youth and how can we help them? So a couple of years went by and it came back in 1990. This time it came back as just the McKinney Act. And again, it asked states, you know what, I know we initially asked you to review the enrollment requirements, but now we want you to get rid of all those enrollment barriers for homeless students because we want them in school under any condition because children and youth should not be missing school. However, 1994, the education portion of the McKinney-Vento Act is now included in ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act. They threw in preschools this time and really wanted to hear from the parents. How can we help? What agencies, resources, and organizations can help your family as a homeless family keep your child in school? So almost a decade went by, and this time it came back better than ever and was known as the McKinney-Vento Act that we all know and love today, and also said, okay, we've got all these great things in place, but we also want every LEA, so all your school districts, county offices, and charter schools, to have a local liaison to make sure that our McKinney-Vento students are getting the information and receiving the rights that they are entitled to. So Natalie, I'm going to stop here before we get into the duties of the local liaisons. If you wanted to just maybe grab one or two questions from the chat, I see a lot coming through.
Well, we only actually have one at the moment, but it's more of a specific question, so I was going to hold it to the end.
Okay, thanks. So our local liaisons, as you just learned under McKinney-Vento, every LEA needs a liaison. So what exactly do they do? Well, our local liaisons do a whole bunch of stuff. First and foremost, they're promptly identify and correctly tag our homeless children that qualify under McKinney-Vento. They make sure that those students remove all those barriers to enrollment and help them along the way in ensuring that they are receiving retention services. Our liaisons also post our educational rights, making sure that those students are getting every service that they are entitled to. Along the way, talking to parents, guardians, and our unaccompanied youth, which we'll get more into along the way of educational opportunities. And of course, it helps that everyone must be trained and able to assist our homeless youth. But they also coordinate multiple services for students and their families. That includes our special ed services or any programs that they may be deemed eligible for. Our liaisons also collaborate with multiple agencies, our community services, our community-based organizations, school personnel and staff, not only at their district site, but within all the other schools, really emphasizing that interagency collaboration. They refer all of the parents and guardians and our unaccompanied youth to public agencies and CBOs for additional services. So that might be helping an entire family receive Medi-Cal, or an unaccompanied youth apply for food stamps. The liaisons assist with mediation of the dispute resolution process, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. And they aid our unaccompanied homeless youth with getting in school and transportation services needed. So you've got a little bit of information and some history on the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, but who are these students? How do we understand what they need and who they are, and how do we correctly identify them? Well, the McKinney-Vento Act under federal law has this qualifying language, and they define homelessness as homeless and children as individuals. They need to lack three things: a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So those are really your guiding phrases when you're determining eligibility for someone who is potentially McKinney-Vento. So children and youth who lack fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residences, you'll see this list of some examples. So campgrounds, public or private areas, they're sleeping outside, emergency and transitional shelters. The McKinney-Vento Act also includes migratory children, the unaccompanied youth, children abandoned in hospitals, families that may be residing with another family in the home. Coin the term doubled up. When you're determining McKinney-Vento eligibility, just because a family is living with another family and is doubled up doesn't necessarily mean that they're lacking fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. So you'll hear me like a broken record say that throughout this presentation, but it is helpful to remember, if you keep your thought on just fixed, regular, and adequate, the McKinney-Vento Act will help you determine the eligibility. Cars, parks, abandoned buildings, and substandard housing as well. So classically, we think of homeless as just that. I'm sleeping outside, I have no shelter. But McKinney-Vento really brings into perspective that someone can have some form of shelter and still be deemed homeless. So substandard housing. Does the house lack basic utilities? Is there running water? Is there electricity? Is the house infested? Is there mold? Is there standing water? Is the roof leaking? Does the house lack basic functions? Does it not have a flushing toilet or a working kitchen, a refrigerator? Maybe there's no windows in two of the rooms. Maybe there are missing doors. So very, very substandard housing. Does the house present any dangers to the adults in the home? Maybe there's someone with disabilities, then they're living upstairs. Someone disabled would not be able to get up those stairs. Small children, maybe there's faultier wiring issues in the home. So all of these are all considerations when considering substandard housing. So there's that fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence again. So when we think of a fixed residence, we think of your house that you go to, The house isn't moving, it's not going anywhere. These are your houses, your apartments, your townhouses. A student has an actual fixed place to go to every single night. But the student may also have a regular residence. So it's used pretty consistently, but maybe I sleep on my cousin's couch 2 nights a week, but then I stay with my friend across town the rest of the week. It's regular and I have somewhere to stay, but it's not fixed. And adequate. So adequate nighttime residence meets the physical and the psychological needs that you would typically see in a fixed home. So you're flushing toilets, you're running water, but it might be in the form of a multi-dwelling or a shelter. That's a picture of a shelter where there could be up to 20 people or more in a room. So we have 4 main types of homelessness that we've talked a little bit about. So we have sheltered, and it is just that. A student and or a family might be staying in a temporary shelter, a domestic violence shelter, a transitional housing shelter. It is just that. They may also be unsheltered. Those are your bus stations, in a vehicle, an abandoned building, an alleyway. Doubled up. I'm sharing this house with another family, but under McKinney-Vento Act, it should be due to an economic hardship or another reason. The house that the family was living in burned down. Someone got laid off of their job and can no longer make their rent or mortgage payment and are forced to move in with another family so that they do not become unsheltered. And hotels and motels. So the family's living in one of those due to the lack of adequate accommodation. So we go back to that substandard housing. The hotel and motel has working toilets and a shower when the substandard housing did not. So unaccompanied youth. You've heard the term a couple of times, but who are they and how does it fit in with the McKinney-Vento Act? So 1 in 6 young people have reported an experience of homelessness. That's almost 20%. That's pretty alarming to think of any youth under the age of 18 sleeping in an abandoned building or a bus station or a park bench outside. So unaccompanied youth, at a glance, they do not need a parent or guardian to enroll in school. They can walk into a school and say, I want to go to school and I'd like to start tomorrow. So under McKinney-Vento law, they cannot be turned away and they have the right to have access to every service as a non-homeless student would have. So our local liaisons, we talked about them and all of their duties. This is really where they come in and ask the homeless youth, what can I help you with? How can I support you? These are your rights as it pertains to education. And of course, our unaccompanied homeless youth without a parent or guardian have the same rights to the appeal system as if they did enroll with their parent or guardian. So our unaccompanied youth definition by law can be defined as any children or youth that is not in the physical custody of their parent or guardian. Now, folks, keep in mind that they're not in the physical custody, but an unaccompanied youth can still be in the legal custody of their parent. So they may not be home, but their parents still have legal custody of them. However, in order to be deemed McKinney-Vento eligible, that student needs to be not only homeless, so our guiding phrase there, defined by McKinney-Vento, so they're lacking fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, but they also must be unaccompanied. So if a student is one or the other, if they're only unaccompanied, they would not qualify for McKinney-Vento services. So on the bottom, you'll see there too, if someone comes in and they are trying to explain that they're having custody issues or guardian issues, I might go live with my uncle. not qualified for McKinney-Vento services because they would have to, A, be defined as McKinney-Vento under fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence and be unaccompanied. So some numbers on our unaccompanied youth. So many of our youth leave the home because of different reasons. So they may try to go to a shelter, but we talked about how the shelters are often scary or they're full, or the youth might have a part-time job and can't adhere to the shelter curfews. Again, the shelters have limited stays. Most commonly here in the county, 30, 60, or 90-day stays. After that time frame is up, the youth would have to find another place to stay. A lot of our youth leave the home due to abuse. Some numbers here, 20 to 50% of youth that leave the home report sexual abuse, while 40 to 60% report physical abuse in the home. Leading us to talk about family dysfunction. So when youth are calling 211 or the runaway or the crisis line, 2/3 of those calls report that at least one of the parents are struggling with abusing drugs or alcohol. About 1/3 of our homeless youth identify as being part of the LGBTQ+ community. That sometimes causes friction in the home, lack of acceptance, lack of communication, prompting the youth to flee the home. And 10% of homeless teens are pregnant.
Hey, Gina, we had a quick question in the chat.
Sure.
The statistics that you're giving, are they for Contra Costa County specifically, or are they more national or kind of mixed?
They're nationwide.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So to determine McKinney-Vento eligibility, there is that same qualifying language again. So the student must meet the McKinney-Vento definition of fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, and the student meets the definition of an unaccompanied youth. So yes, they are lacking the nighttime residence. So are they homeless? We've checked that there. Are they unaccompanied? They left the home, they're not with their parents. So yes, they're unaccompanied. So they become an unaccompanied homeless youth and McKinney-Vento eligible. So this student would be tagged in the school district as not only homeless, but unaccompanied, and is therefore an unaccompanied homeless youth that is qualified to receive McKinney-Vento services. Now, if a student is not McKinney-Vento eligible, we have our same little chart here. So the student meets the McKinney-Vento definition of homeless. No, they're staying with their cousin, and so they are not lacking the fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence. So homeless, we've checked no there. Does the student meet the definition of unaccompanied? Yes, they're staying with their cousin and are not in the physical custody of their parent. So are they unaccompanied? Yes. Therefore, the youth is unaccompanied, but not McKinney-Vento eligible. So the school district should really work to provide the student with the appropriate services. However, they will not qualify for McKinney-Vento services because you remember, to qualify, you have to be McKinney-Vento eligible, homeless, and unaccompanied. You can't have one or the other. All right, so test time for you folks. I have a situational question here, and then you guys can tell me what you think. So all of you are beginning your first school year as your district's local liaison. It's August, the students are starting to come in for the school year and enroll. So the principal calls you with a question. So a teacher at his school wants to enroll her niece, Sarah, in his school, but the principal is kind of on the fence. He's not sure if that's okay. So the niece has just moved in with her aunt, who's the teacher at the school, over the summer. So her dad, who's a widower, has moved to a new city because he got a new job. However, he wants his daughter to finish her senior year at the high school with her friends. The teacher, the aunt, doesn't have some of the paperwork that she needs to enroll, but says, well, that's not an issue. because Sarah's unaccompanied and can enroll under McKinney-Vento. So my question to all of you is, would you deem Sarah eligible for McKinney-Vento services as an unaccompanied homeless youth? So you can go ahead and put your answer and what you think in the chat there. And then Natalie can give us.
We're getting a whole lot of no's.
Oh, all right.
People are
So
saying she's not homeless. I've seen only no's right now.
oh, and the reason is because she's not homeless.
Yep.
So can she just be unaccompanied under McKinney-Vento?
That somebody said unaccompanied but not considered homeless. No.
Good job, guys. You're right, because under McKinney-Vento and to be qualified as an unaccompanied homeless youth, she would need to be both. So I'll have to make that question harder next time. Good job. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some barriers and strategies for our homeless children and youth, what they struggle with and how we can help them overcome some of those barriers. So first, some more numbers for you. So our homeless students, twice as likely to score poorly on standardized testing, in particular math and reading. But that number triples to be more likely to be placed in a special ed program. Our homeless students are 4 times more likely to drop out of school completely and 8 to 9 times more likely to have to repeat grades. So pretty alarming numbers there. Those are nationwide numbers as well. So some of the barriers that our school district folks run into is barriers to identifying our McKinney-Vento and homeless students and our unaccompanied youth students. So some of those reasons include the lack of understanding of the definition of homeless. We talked about the classical definition. So a family doesn't really see themselves as homeless if I'm staying with a family and I'm doubled up. I'm not sleeping outside, so my family is not homeless. The desire to avoid the stigma often associated with homelessness. How are people going to perceive me? Is my child going to be treated differently or being made fun of? The fear that they might be found out. Parents are often concerned if they are homeless. Is my child going to be taken away from me? Is school personnel going to call CPS or the authorities and make a report? Am I going to lose my kids? And our unaccompanied youth, because they're unaccompanied, often they can be difficult to identify. They might not have the proper paperwork, and our registrars or school district staff have to dig around a little and find out the story as why they're unaccompanied and what their situation is to have them leave the home. So strategies for identification. Well, we can create a welcoming and supportive environment. We want not only the students, but the families to understand that it's a safe place, that we're here to help and provide them with additional resources and referrals and agencies that can help them. For our youth, in particular, our unaccompanied youth, I want to encourage folks to develop outreach materials that are friendly. I know that posters and flyers help, but everything's digital. So you're posting on websites and on Twitter and Instagram. You're also developing positive relationships with youth, letting them know you can come and talk to me. What we talk about is confidential, you can share. However, as a mandated reporter, if I hear something that I feel is going to impact your well-being, I am required to report that. So homelessness creates a lot of things, but first and foremost, they create a ton of barriers for our students. So students that are homeless, they might experience not being able to meet standard school enrollment requirements. So they don't have the paperwork. They don't understand which school they can actually attend, especially our unaccompanied youth. Because of this, they may move around and change schools a lot. So it's not so much the changing schools, but the other part that goes along with that. They're having to just uproot and go to a new strange school and leave their friends and people behind that maybe they were comfortable being with. So it's a shell shock to their system to have to just go to a different location. Our homeless students may be hungry and tired and stressed. Maybe the food that they're receiving at school is the only meal they're receiving throughout the day. Maybe they slept outside or in a car. They don't have access to basic school supplies or a quiet place to study. That would definitely impact their performance at school. No access to transportation. I'm missing school and have become truant because I can't get a ride in the morning. I don't have money to get on the bus and go. It's too far for me to walk, so I will just skip school. Those unaccompanied youth, they don't have a guardian or parent to help them not only enroll, but to provide guidance for them within the family as they're growing up. The lack of stable housing, of course. Some of our students have experienced emotional and mental health trauma, the reason for homelessness. And maybe they do not even have consistent access to facilities. It becomes a hygiene issue. I can't do my laundry. I don't even have a place to take a shower. So also affecting education. We talked about transportation, but our homeless students tend to have erratic attendance, sporadic attendance coming to school. They're ditching, they're leaving early, numerous tardies. The inability to contact parents. If a parent did come in to enroll their child, the phone number that they listed maybe is not in service anymore, or they had it a friend's phone number. The friend says, we're not talking anymore. The school district staff has no idea how to get in touch with these parents. The lack of continuity in education. So you'll see those gaps in skill development. Remember, 8 to 9 times more likely to drop out of school completely. The enrollment in several schools, which can make those records difficult to get. And the general issues in class. They can't concentrate, they can't focus. Sometimes our homeless students are falling asleep in class and maybe turning in incomplete assignments, if at all. So strategies for that list. Well, some sites are actually looking into providing easy access to facilities, mobile showers, mobile laundry, handing out hygiene kits to our homeless students. School site staff implementing policies to find out how those students can accumulate extra credits for partial credit, full credit maybe that they earned at different institutions. Becoming more familiar with the criteria for social services and housing programs. What housing shelters are available for our youth? Which agencies can make a housing referral that takes the entire family? For teachers, giving flexibility with school assignments, not only with homework, but any deadlines and needed supplies that they might need. So maybe they're interested in applying for college, but have missed the deadline. McKinney-Vento says that they are exempt from skipping those deadlines. They still could apply. And understanding state laws about minor medical consent. As an unaccompanied youth, typically when a student has a doctor's appointment, they would need a parent's note to excuse that so it doesn't become a truancy. Minor medical consent for unaccompanied youth says an unaccompanied youth could in fact sign themselves out because they were able to enroll in school. So Natalie, I'm going to stop before I get into academic success and check in with you for questions.
Yeah, we do have a handful of questions. I'm trying to see which ones are, let's see. A couple of people have asked, how do I get a liaison for one of my youth? I think Angelica is taking care of that question individually. There is, somebody asked, are homeless youth or unaccompanied youth with chronic illnesses given priority?
So under McKinney-Vento and unaccompanied youth, those students do not have to have any barriers. So essentially, yes, the answer is yes, they are given priority because they're the exemption to having to wait on any enrollment documents.
Okay. And are peers used to reach out to other youth?
Not typically.
Okay.
So Angelica's taking care of the liaison list. I also will send that out, but we have a list of all of the appointed liaisons, not only at the school districts, but the charter schools as well. So we'll make sure that everyone receives that list.
Okay. And then what percentage or how many of McKinney-Vento eligible youth in our county would you say are foster youth?
So that's a tough one because they're classified differently. Angelica, do you have? Angelica's going to get you that number and she will
Okay.
drop it in the chat.
Thank you. And then the only other one was, does McKinney-Vento apply for undocumented children?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Perfect. That's all. Thank you.
All right, so we're now moving into getting these kids on the track to graduating, going to school, and succeeding. So how do we do that? So McKinney-Vento law says students that qualify under McKinney-Vento should have equal access to the following. So the GATE program, Gifted and Talented Education, Special Ed Services, Migrant Education, our EL programs, vocational education. Any student who is deemed homeless per McKinney-Vento automatically qualifies for a free and reduced lunch program. They should already be receiving that. Title I funded schools and programs and before and after school programs. So McKinney-Vento also says that students are entitled to immediate enrollment, even if they come in and have no paperwork. Typically, when a non-homeless student enrolls, we ask for a birth certificate, proof of residency, immunization records, exit grades from their previous school. Under McKinney-Vento Act, none of those documents are required. There's no lapse in enrollment. So that student could start school that afternoon without any documents. And registrars are on the hook for tracking down the CUME file for that student and all of those documents I just mentioned and making sure that the student is enrolled at the school. The reminder there again for any missed application or enrollment deadlines do not apply to McKinney-Vento students, and students must receive their records in a timely manner from the registrars. So when we say immediate enrollment, we're defining that per McKinney-Vento as students that are attending classes, participating, and attending regularly. So more strategies for enrollment. So folks should really become familiar with our local policies, but also on a state level on how to accommodate our homeless and unaccompanied youth. Making sure that school district staff understands the McKinney-Vento Act, but all of their rights as well. What are families as a whole unit experiencing homelessness entitled to, and what services could benefit them as a family? And making sure that staff also is aware of that immediate enrollment piece so that families that are experiencing homelessness don't get turned away. Contact information for the local liaison should also be posted at the school sites. If you don't know who the liaison is in a particular district, you can let me know and I will happily get that information to you. All right, McKinney-Vento students are also entitled to choosing their school. So they have the right to attend the school of their choice, which is twofold. So the first piece is the local school, where they might be doubled up or staying in that attendance area. There might be a school down the street and they choose to attend that. Because they're McKinney-Vento, they really don't have fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. So they are entitled to go to the school that's closest to them, which makes sense. The other option they have is their school of origin. So this pertains to the last school that the homeless student attended, or the last school when they were permanently housed. And before they became homeless, maybe they went to a school that was out of town. They are still entitled to attend that school of origin if they choose. And of course, we don't want to forget our little guys. That includes our public preschools as well. So when selecting a school, we have to really determine as a school district, the school district looks at what is in the best interest of the student. So more often times than not, the school district will keep the child or strongly recommend that they stay in the school of origin. Maybe they've been there already for a year. It makes sense. The student wants to stay in their school of origin. However, the parent may think that it's a bad idea, or people at the school are a bad influence on their student and they don't want to stay there. But overall, the school district almost always selects the school of origin as the best interest for the student. Also, the district looks at factors and how it impacts the student. So what is the health and safety, the overall well-being of that student at that school? How are they doing academically and achievement-wise? So they would recommend that, but also give the priority request coming from the parent or the guardian, or the unaccompanied youth for that matter. McKinney-Vento students also eligible for transportation services. So transportation must be provided to and from the student's school of origin. However, if we're dealing with an unaccompanied youth, that request needs to come from our local liaison. So the transportation from the school of origin would be valid to our public preschools and the receiving schools as well. However, when a student now expresses they're no longer homeless, that school district or charter school or county office of ed must continue to provide transportation for that student for the remainder of the academic year. So if a student becomes housed, if you will, halfway through the school year, the LEA must still give transportation to that student until the end of the school year. So for example, a student, an unaccompanied youth student who has been determined to be McKinney-Vento eligible is staying at a shelter in San Francisco, but their school of origin is in San Jose. They're still attending school in San Jose. The San Jose School District is required to provide transportation from San Francisco to school for that student every day. So when you look at this slide very quick, you'll see the top 5 reasons and challenges that children faced when they were attending school. So down at the bottom, you'll see poor health and medical care. Maybe a student can't go to the dentist because they have no health insurance, or now they're an unaccompanied youth and have no idea because they're not speaking to their parents. Lack of clothing and supplies. This is a big one where we see a lot with our homeless students. They have not even a backpack to attend school, or I'm missing school because I don't have an alarm clock. I'm sleeping outside. I miss school. I wake up late every day. The inability to do homework. It's loud at the shelter, or it's raining. I can't do my homework. I can't find anywhere, a quiet place to study. The lack of transportation, we've talked about that. School districts do not provide school bus transportation anymore, only with the exception of special ed. And then our top challenge reported was the family overall is just worried about their basic survival needs. How are we going to eat? Where are we going to stay? 82% on that one. So dispute resolution. Sometimes when a family or an accompanied youth comes in and enrolls in a school, everything is great. Everything goes according to plan and everything is wonderful. But sometimes it doesn't go well. And sometimes there's an issue or a disagreement, and it comes between the school and the parent, the guardian, or the school and the unaccompanied youth. And it could be over eligibility. Maybe the family thinks that they're eligible for McKinney-Vento services, and the school district is saying, no, you're not, per McKinney-Vento law. We don't deem you as homeless. The disagreement could be over school selection. You're recommending the school of origin, I disagree, or just overall enrollment procedures. But in that case, the student or family, regardless of how bad the disagreement is, that student still needs to be enrolled immediately. They can go through the dispute resolution process, they can appeal it, but it does not matter. There's no lapse in enrollment. The student still needs to attend school, regardless. And if there is a dispute, the student or the family will be provided an explanation within 30 days of that school district of the outcome. And of course, they're referred to the local liaison. So the local liaison will really see the process from beginning to end and make sure that that youth gets enrolled, stays in school, and is receiving the services that they're entitled to. And they're entitled to receive all of those services until there's a final resolution regarding the dispute. All right, graduation is really our end goal. So we're going to talk a little bit about AB 1806 and graduation requirements for our McKinney-Vento youth. So AB 1806 was passed back in September of 2014, but it really didn't go into effect until January of 2015. So what AB 1806 said was, well, we're going to provide notice of potential expulsions. So this really required the local liaison to be included in these situations so that the liaison could monitor the student and the family and check in with them and let them know this is going to be the outcome. Your student is going to be expelled if they do not follow this procedure or get back on track. Partial credits. 1806 also said, okay, well, schools, make sure that you're looking on the transcripts, registrars in particular. Did the homeless student complete any credits, even partially? So it shouldn't just be 0 credits or 5 credits. If they went to English class halfway, maybe they're eligible for a credit or 2. Everyone counts toward graduation, so we will take what we can get. Also, homeless youth can qualify to graduate by completing only the state requirements. You guys may know it as AB 167, where students would only have to complete 130 credits, which would be the bare minimum to graduate. Does not include electives. So more about AB 1806. The youth can opt to graduate under AB 1806, but 2 things. They need to be homeless and they had to have transferred schools after their 2nd year. So an incoming freshman or someone who just started their sophomore year cannot walk into the registrar's office and say, you know what, I think I only want to do AB 167. I'm homeless, I'm only going to do the bare bones minimum. It needs to be after the 2nd year of high school. And they also need to be significantly behind in credits. It's already known that even if they went to summer school and they got straight A's, they're so behind, they're not going to graduate on time. So the student, if they opt to graduate under AB 1806, they can apply and talk to their registrar and their counselor, and it's been deemed that they are potentially eligible, they would be notified within 30 days of transferring to that school. So a couple of things to think about. Students have the right to also become a 5th year senior. So they can stay 1 extra year to catch up on all of those credits and graduate with the class the following year. However, if they do opt to become a 5th year senior, that may impact post-secondary options when going to college. All right, so a few more state legislation for you regarding homeless children and youth. So we have SB 177, that's known as the Homeless Youth Education Success Act. And what that says is homeless students meet the residency and all of the requirements for extracurricular activities. So if a homeless student wants to, say, play football or do cheerleading, doesn't matter if they're homeless, they meet those requirements. They should not be excluded because of their McKinney-Vento status. It also requires those local liaisons to make sure that those educational rights are not only discussed with the family and the students, but they're also posted. So many of you have probably seen the You Can Enroll in School posters. That's our educational rights poster. If your site needs some or you would like them posted at your location, reach out to me and I will happily drop some off to your site. AB 309, CalFresh, you may know it as food stamps or SNAP benefits for homeless youth. So there is no age limit to apply for food stamps. If a youth, 15, 16 years old, is hungry, they're homeless, they can absolutely apply for food stamps. AB 1733 says that homeless individuals, youth or adult, are entitled to free ID cards and birth certificate waivers. They do not need to pay, I believe for an ID card, it's $40 and a birth certificate is $55. So those fee waivers really help out this population to get them an ID card and a birth certificate. Social Security cards also, replacement cards are free. And I have that application if folks need that. We can drop that in the chat as well. AB 652. So an unaccompanied youth comes in. That does not mean you automatically call CPS and deem them a runaway, they're troubled, they're in danger. It is not grounds for a CPS report. And finally, AB 1006. AB 1006 says the juvenile court records can petition to be sealed and destroyed. However, that only applies to nonviolent crimes and their records. So I want to thank you guys for sticking with me and listening to me for a whole hour. Again, my name's Gina Bills. I'm the education liaison over at the county office. So I am housed at the Pleasant Hill location over on Santa Barbara Road. That phone number you see is my direct extension as well as my email. So please, I want to encourage you to call or email me with any questions that you have. In my role as the education liaison, I am responsible for not only our public schools, all 18 counties here in our 18 districts in our county, but all of our charter schools as well and COEs. So any information, resources, county community-based organizations, agencies that you might need more information on or want to become familiar with, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. So again, thank you, everyone. And
Thanks.
Natalie, if there's any questions?
Thanks, Gina. Yeah, we just had a couple more come through. If the student is a McKinney-Vento student, is there any proof required by the school for them to get the free lunches?
No, so under McKinney-Vento, they're automatically, well, they should be notated in their data tracking system. So whether that's Infinite Campus or Aries or Power School, the registrar would automatically include them. And most oftentimes the cafeteria and the registrar will connect and make sure that those lists are matching up to make sure that those students are receiving free lunches.
Okay. And then another question somebody asked that they are working with an undocumented homeless family who lives in an emergency shelter. This is out of San Francisco though.
Okay.
And their son wasn't accepted into the school, or their child wasn't accepted into the school because they could not provide the documents the school asked for. Who should they connect with to get help?
Okay, so the student was not enrolled in public school for this
Correct.
reason. So McKinney-Vento qualifies. Even if the student does not have the documentation, they should not be exempt or excluded from attending public school. They need to reach out to the registrar at that school.
Okay.
And if they are unable to connect with them, they need to talk to their homeless liaison within the district in San Francisco.
Okay, great.
And if they have questions about that, they can email me and I can talk to them further.
And then is there any legislation that is in place for youth who experience trauma? The person's understanding is that AB 1806 are for homeless youth, but she's curious about supporting students that have either high ACE scores or traumatic backgrounds.
And Helga, do you want to fill that one? Okay, so currently none that Angelica is aware of, but we can definitely research that a little bit more and get
Okay.
some more information and follow up.
Okay, thank you. And then as a migrant youth, do you have to be unaccompanied and lack proper housing to be considered homeless? Or to solely be considered under McKinney-Vento? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, that's a little vague. Is that person still on the call? Can they?
Elizabeth, do you want to unmute?
Yeah,
and
I
ask
can
the question?
clarify. So I guess I got lost in the beginning. So I guess